Hey, welcome back to the Gilbertson Aero Factory. Today is Tuesday, the 7th of January, 2025, 11 o'clock in the morning, I would say. It's not very warm in the shop. It's even colder outside, but I do have the door open. Going to get back into riveting here. Just to recap, yesterday I was able to do all the riveting along this back row on the bottom side of the right flap. Now I got to get that done on the left flap, and then the ribs, and then the end ribs, and then the brackets and everything like that. So we'll see how far we get today. Yesterday, by the way, evening, Tim and I recorded episode 2 of We Are Not Experts, an airplane building podcast. Better than the first one. Technically getting a little bit better. It'll get a little bit better every time. Really enjoy doing it, so we hope that you enjoy listening to it, and would definitely appreciate your feedback and your input if there's something specifically that you want us to discuss. What else? It's available on Apple and Spotify, and I really think that's about it. I think it's time to build an airplane. I'm pretty excited about getting more into this riveting stuff because it's been so much time spent in prep. And once these assemblies are done, I get to go back and do all the plumbing and the wiring inside the wings, but I also have some things that I need to go back and redo or fix, namely the aileron brackets. I've got the Cherry Max rivets to do that. I have a couple down there. So once this is done, I'll get back into that. Get these things actually up on the wings. It's not going to happen quickly. Everything takes longer with me. Get these things up on the wings, and then sometime down the road in the next few weeks, maybe, get ready to button these things up and get on with my life, which get on with my life actually means go back to repairing the leaks in the tanks. So anyways, enough talking. Let's just start building an airplane. Thanks for being here.
Okay, here we go, back into the high-speed action. Continuing with the riveting of the flaps. So glad to be at this point. And the weather, although it was quite cool, was pretty pleasant. So that worked out just fine, and it wasn't a windy day. So beginning here, it is the bottom of the left flap, and we have that long row of rivets where the two skins meet on top of that fake that fake spar, pseudo spar, whatever you want to call it. This, as I said before, it wasn't terribly difficult. Oh, here we go. It's a little bit weird. In the first, I don't know, half hour, maybe even less than that, 20 minutes or so, the GoPro randomly quit like 2 times. So anyways, back to what we're doing here. Riveting, I did have, throughout the course of the build session, which was about 5.6 hours, I think 4 rivets that I wanted to get rid of. That's really not that bad. Remarkably, this wasn't as difficult riveting as I expected it to be. So I think what I did first is did every other rivet all the way across, and then came back every other rivet to finish it up. I did try to use the rivet removal tool that Jack Cole Freeman sent me. It is for AN 470 universal head rivets, but he said he'd had some luck with them on flush rivets, so I decided to try it, and I stopped really quickly, knowing that it was a coin flip whether or not it was going to work, because the hole wasn't quite centered on that rivet, so I just got rid of it. I do have a drill index that has every range of sizes imaginable. So lately what I've been doing when I'm drilling out these small 3/32 rivets, that we drilled them with a number 40 drill bit, I'll usually drill them out with like a number 42 or 43 So there's a little bit of grace there if I'm a little off center. Anyways, let's see. I'll show you a little bit of what this looks like from the inside here. Hold on. Okay, I'm going to let this go here for a minute so you can see a few being set on the return pass. They're not perfect, but they're pretty good. But you can see how tight that space is. That noise you hear in the background, other than the rivet gun whacking on that bucking bar, is episode 2 of Tim and I on the We Are Not Experts podcast. So here you see the rivet popping in. See my hand going. This one ends up being a little bit crooked. Acceptable, but not perfecto. And I think the one after this, the next one I drop in, you'll get a much better view of what it actually looks like when the bucking bar is bouncing on that rivet. So the rivet goes in, the big fat hand goes in, and is it this one? No, it must be the following. There we go. And action. There you go. Not a bad result. So anyways, yeah, that's how that went. I'm pretty happy with it overall. Yeah, you see a little scuffing on the primer, and that primer wasn't really put on very thick to begin with. And that's that little pseudo spar in the background there. So this is what I spent all day on Tuesday, the January 5th of 2025 doing. Yeah, pretty happy with it. So now you got to look at it from the inside and hear from the inside what that actually looks like. So I had to do that whole rivet row, and then it looks like we flash forward to getting into riveting the ribs to the skins. I'm starting at the bottom of the right skin over there. As you can imagine, that wasn't very difficult. It looks like at this point, because I kind of jumped ahead in the video, the left flap, which is right in front of you, the bottom of that has already been done completely. These went, well, I want to say they went really quickly. It was still, more than a 5.5 hour day, but it wasn't very difficult to do this. And again, I found out that it was just easier for me to do the riveting with the flap laying flat on the table. And so you see how I kind of have the ends hanging off, because the only place now I'm riveting the top of the skin. The only place on the bottom of the skin that has clecos on it are just on the end ribs. So now I can lay this completely flat on the table. I don't want to set it up there where there are clecos at either end, and if you press down the middle, you get some flex in it. So it all came out nice and flat and easy. All of these ribs were easy to rivet by comparison to running along that back row there. The only place where it maybe gets a little bit tricky is the very first, or I guess last, the furthest aft rivet along that flange, the rib flange where it meets that aft spar. Gets a little bit tight in there, but I could do it with either one of my usual bucking bars. I think for me, the big difference maker was readjusting my gun so that it's hitting heavy enough for a 3/32 rivet, but light enough that I can completely depress the trigger without any threat of it over squeezing or over driving the rivet. So much easier to control and many fewer mistakes, and I would say virtually dent free on all few hundred of these rivets that I did. So now moving to the top of the left flap with my handy dandy light, I'll basically do an entire rib and then check it with a light and see if there are any there that I need to go back in and touch up. And there are always, I would say every other rib, maybe one or two that just need a few more hits. Once all of those are done, we'll get into one thing I will say about doing this. I said that the tricky one could be the furthest aft on the rib flange. It does get really tight down there. if you put the rivet in the hole and then try to get in there with your hand in the bucking bar, you won't be able to get under the rivet. What you need to do, or what I need to do, is stick my hand with the bucking bar all the way in there, and I use a light to look down through the hole to make sure that the bucking bar is fully covering the hole. I drop the rivet in. The rivet's going to sit proud. It's going to sit up above the edge of the skin, and then come in with the rivet gun, and then I can push down with the rivet gun and basically squish my hand in there to get the rivet nice and down into the dimple. And then when you start squeezing it, it will start to give and make room. So, doing that way. So if your fingertips are any fatter than mine, that might be more of a challenge. Let's see. So once those are done, we need to get into the end ribs, and the plans describe, okay, now that you've dimpled the skins to all of the interior ribs, go ahead and add I think it's called the 706B. It's the bracket that we had to put that 6.7 degree bend in. And we did the nut plate and everything like that. Looking back, there's no reason to wait to rivet that bracket onto that rib. It's completely arbitrary. It doesn't, I mean, you can go ahead and rivet that bracket and the nut plate and everything, and then go ahead and install it just to keep the flap nice and square and tight while you do the interior ribs, but there's no reason to wait to put that bracket on there. So anyways, that's what I'm doing here, and I ended up having to drill out I had to drill out one of the rivets in one of the nut plates because I tried to, foolishly, I think I tried to rivet it while it was installed on the wing, and that was stupid. There's no point. Just take it out and use a squeezer, and it's all fine. So it's all good. It's all done. One of those brackets I had to take over to the Scotch-Brite wheel and give it a little bit of an adjustment because it was sitting proud of the rib. And so that would put stress on the wing, so it would sit a little bit up, and actually it would prevent, once the wing skin is on there, or rather the flap skin is on there, it would prevent the holes from even lining up on that bracket. So anyways, make the adjustments as you need them. That's a part that you more or less fabricated from, you did all the match drilling and whatnot on there, so that's how that goes. But it all worked out fine. I'm really pleased with the results so far. I think what's left to do on here, which is not a small task, but what's left to do tomorrow, or when I have time, is to add the forward spars and the piano hinge. And so there's a little bit more work that needs to be done with that piano hinge, a little bit of some decision making that we'll get into. We'll discuss that when it comes around. There is one thing that I want to note for anybody who's coming up to this. The trailing edge on this, like other control surfaces, is really tricky getting the last rivet down there where it gets so tight. You need to, in my opinion, if you have like the trailing edge bucking bar like I do that can wedge down in there, before you commit to riveting the last rivet hole on either the top or the bottom, look at which one is furthest back, which one is closest to the trailing edge. Rivet that one first, because they're offset by a little bit. But if you do something that I did, which is if you do the one that's on the bottom skin, it's the second to the top to bottom. How do I describe this? On the top and the bottom, there is a last rivet on each one, but they're not directly across from each other. One is further back than the other. If you do the one that is a little bit closer to the front, where you have more room, if you do that one first, you're screwing yourself trying to get that trailing edge rivet bar or bucking bar in there later. I hope that makes sense. Just look at it and do the very last one first when you have the most room, because once you start to set rivets in there, that bucking bar is going to be lifted even higher and give you less room to get it in there. And it is a tight space. Most thankfully, this is where you see me right here. This is the outboard end of the left flap, and the flange, thank goodness, faces outward on that one, so you can squeeze most of them. It's just the last couple that I talked about that are pretty tricky. On the inboard end, that flange faces in, so that the flange faces in on that rib, so that whole end is more or less flush. You have to get in there and buck most of those rivets except for the last two on the top and bottom, so 4 per wing. Per the plans are an MK319BS, which is a countersunk 3/32 ish pop rivet or pull rivet. It's like 7/64. You got those, and there is one spot that I'll be amazed if you don't need to. There's one more spot on the bottom of that inboard rib where you will most likely need to use a pull rivet, and that's directly underneath that nut plate. There's kind of no way around it. Yeah, I don't know. So anyways, that's how that went. Got all those done. Tomorrow, if I have time, I have a lot of stuff that I need to get done. If I have time tomorrow, I will finish getting these flaps all riveted together, and then we can move on to other things. Let's see what else is going on here. Yeah, I have got a lot of tools out there for just the last few bits of things. That's probably why it took 5.5 plus hours to do this, is because when you get to the closing out of the ends, then you're using several tools to do a handful of rivets and a lot of back and forth. And the very final one, which is very much like me, the very final rivet that I had to do today, I ended up having to drill that out twice. It's one of the ones I described that's up close to that aft spar, and I kept tipping it over. Finally got it, but yeah, I went out with a bang, so to speak. So that, I think, pretty much covers today's build session. Really happy with it. I'm glad that I got to have a full build session without any interruptions other than a few small mistakes of my own. I don't know if I'll have another day like that this week that I can do it, but if so, you'll know about it first. Again, episode 2 of We Are Not Experts, an airplane building podcast, is available right now on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Would love to get your feedback. I will see you on the next one.